I think the Korean is more goal oriented and
Mhm.
they have a really high expectation over their life.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like Korean is living in the future. They
Yeah.
cannot stay in the present to enjoy the happiness.
Yes. And that's the
Yeah.
opposite with
So
Mexicans.
yeah.
We are
So
happy in the present.
so you guys, I mean, I'm talking about the Mexican people.
Mhm.
They are more enjoying the present
Mhm.
to keep the right here is the happiness. But
Mhm.
Korean, oppositely, we are just seizing the big happiness
Yeah,
rather than keeping
exactly.
the current hour happiness.
Yeah.
And also, you explained it before. The Mexican is more for fun, and Korean is more serious
Oh, you
when
guys are
we
fun
meet
too.
first.
You guys are fun
Yes,
too.
exactly.
But
It
maybe
depends on the people.
maybe after like, some soju bomb or like that,
Yeah,
you let it go.
yeah. The dinner party and hey, Gresha.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. Good to see you again. And I know there is quite late night, yes, but I'm really appreciate you are now here and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, thanks. So excited to join you here tonight.
Yeah, thank
Your
thank you for
day,
being
my
here
night.
again. Yes, my day and your night. Grisha, by the way, for the listeners, could you please introduce yourself a little bit? Maybe you just include your background. Where are you living and what do you do?
Okay, so 안녕하세요, everybody. My name is Grecia Sim. I currently live in Atlanta, but I'm originally from Mexico, but I have been living in the US for almost all my life. So I'm a little bit of everywhere. Yes, I'm multicultural, very multicultural. I'm also married to a Korean, and we've been together for about like 12, no, 14 years almost. Like dating two, and then it's already been like about 10 years, 11 years. My math is horrible. I'm sorry. But yes, we've been together a long time now, and we have two beautiful kids, four pets, two dogs, two cats. So my house is very busy all the time. Multiple things going on. I am by profession, I'm a graphic designer too. So love the arts um and everything about it.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Wow, I didn't know that your marriage already passed almost 14 years. Time
Yeah,
flies.
it does. It does. Yeah, it went by very fast.
Yeah.
One thing
Wow.
you're dating, and next thing you know, you're like trying to see what time you have to wake up the kids.
Yeah. And also now you have two kids and also two pets. Wow, your family size is so big.
Yeah, yeah. It's very busy here. Very loud.
Okay. Very loud. So today's the podcast topic,
Mhm.
actually, as you already talked before, we are going to talk about the multicultural marriage life.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as you already explained about yourself, you were born and raised in Mexico. As far as I know, you were born in Chihuahua City, right?
Yeah, no, Juárez, but the state is Chihuahua. Glad you remember.
Okay.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, I remember how did I forget about it actually?
I
You know,
know.
Chihuahua is the most popular breed of dog in Korea.
I know.
Everybody is very familiar with that city.
Yeah, I know,
The city
right?
named Chihuahua.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So maybe you will explain more about your city and
Yeah,
as
yeah, of
you
course.
uh, yeah and also as you explained it before, you got married to Korean man and you have two kids and now you are living in the United States.
Yes.
How multicultural you are.
Yeah. And then even to add to that, because of my work, I do work with like the international side of the business.
Mm,
And I have had the opportunity to focus in with the Asia Pacific,
mm,
teammates. And I have had the opportunity to go to the Korean office in Seoul when I've, half visiting family, but also doing remote work. So I also have been able to expand my exposure to the Korean culture past just my family. I've also had the
yeah,
opportunity to also be in that work office environment.
yeah,
That's another
right.
story.
So yeah, it's another story, but this topic is already included in our today's
Yeah,
topic, so we're gonna spill one by one.
so much to talk
Yeah, so much to talk about.
about.
Yes, I think we need to separate this podcast episode, maybe 2 or 3, to
Oh,
cover every
totally.
history. Grisha, so we're gonna talk about your marriage life. How's your marriage life with Korean man?
I'm just kidding. Um, okay, as you'll know, I am a little bit on the silly side, so get ready, everybody. No, I think it's been very interesting for sure. As even before I started dating my husband, I obviously dated within my Hispanic heritage, right? So it was very different. So I can start with the dating part because I actually to start with my exposure to Korean culture. It wasn't even attached to Korean. Back in when we were living in Mexico, my little brother did Taekwondo. And to be
Mm,
honest, even back then, I was probably like in middle school, high school. I wasn't even aware that Taekwondo was Korean. Like I had no idea. No, to be honest, I'm so sorry.
okay.
Because back then, like, it was Mexico, is very big in Taekwondo. If you start looking at the finals, we always make it to the Olympics. So it's
Mm,
it's always a good comebacks with them. So for me, that was my first exposure. And then actually when from going back and forth between Mexico and US, eventually my little brother also made the move to the US. And
mm,
to have him do something that he was familiar with, we took him to Taekwondo again. But this time, we found a Taekwondo studio that had like a Korean master, right? And
mm,
and it was in Florida, and the master was like 100% Korean. Like his English was very limited, thick
mm,
English accent, right? And there were a lot of Korean kids. So that's when I knew it was obviously an Asian sport, but that was for me my real first time being exposed to Korean people. And I started to do the classes with him so he wouldn't feel alone. And this
mm,
was college for me. So I was already, early 20s. I was trying Taekwondo for the first time. And I
mm,
loved it. It was great. I loved the discipline. I loved the hard work. And I when I look back of it, I guess it reflects a lot of things you see in the Korean culture. The
mm,
way they're very dedicated. Like I feel that you like being the best at whatever you do, right? You always strive to be the best. So that was like my first little introduction to Korean people, like seeing how compared to our Hispanic side, they can be very
mhm,
different. I think we're both very hardworking, but maybe Korea, they're a little bit more serious, and we're no matter how hard things are, we're always playful, and
uh-huh,
as a result from being in Taekwondo, I made friends closer to my age, and through that friend,
mhm.
I met my husband.
Oh,
And yeah, so from there too, like, we started talking, and up to there in my mind, like, oh, this is just another man. I didn't think of
mm,
being like Asian or being Korean. Yeah, I was just getting to know him as a person without the filter of culture. Because
mm,
I always felt that way. Like I didn't want to stereotype because that's maybe because I live in the US. There's so many
mhm,
backgrounds, right? Even within
mhm,
Hispanics, you're like, oh, that person is from Colombia and they can be like this. And then maybe for you guys in Asia,
mm,
it's similar. No, oh, that person is Chinese, so they're like this. And this person's Japanese, so they're like that. So it's very similar to us. So that's why I
mhm,
tried my best, right, to see things that way. But obviously, as you get to know the person, culture is very strong and it's very in deep on everybody's person, right? So sometimes some things,
mm,
on our ways of doing things, whether it was from culture or just personality, right?
mhm,
So I think that was interesting dynamic while we were dating because we were getting to know each other, and obviously for him he
mhm,
had also just dated Korean girls, and then he
mhm.
went to total opposite of the spectrum.
Yeah.
As you may know, where they're the way Korean women can be with the oppa and all of that, and I'm and I'm Nuna technically, right?
Yeah.
So it was also the age gap too, where
Uh-huh.
because of my personality, we didn't feel it that much because he's
Mm.
very mature. So I think we leveled
Mhm.
up on that side. He actually thought I was younger than him. I was like, "Oh, no." It's just
Yeah.
4 years. It's just 4 years, not that much. But I think that's when, we started to see a lot of differences. The age, the culture,
Mhm.
personalities,
Mhm.
because he's more introvert
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
way extrovert. So,
Yeah, I bet you are way more extrovert than your husband.
yes, even for Mexicans, I'm very extrovert. So
Mm.
it was a lot. And there were things that I think up to this day, he's always telling me, before I met you, I didn't
Mhm.
know this, or I didn't do this, or I was just not aware of this. And I think it's
Mm.
similar to me with him, where maybe I think I do tell him he's my better half because obviously I'm very loud and I'm always trying to do everything like pali-pali no, not pali-pali, but,
Mm.
like, just always move and where he makes me calm down, think about it.
Mm.
So that's one of the things where with the personalities
Huh?
feels like it balance I think we balance each other for sure, where there's some things
Yeah.
that I push him to do or, like,
Mhm.
"Don't be too shy about it. If you want, try it out."
Mhm.
Or things like that. But I was actually even though I know his personality and Koreans can be a little bit more reserved,
Mhm.
especially when you guys don't know each other. Like,
Yeah, we're very
yeah,
reserved
you're
actually.
very reserved. When you don't know somebody, you're, like, very formal.
Mhm.
It's very like, "I don't know you, just let's just talk what we need to talk." But I started to feel that with Mexican culture, we also speak informal language. So I think that was kind
Mhm.
of similar, right? We talk have the
Mm.
same values. Like when we talk to our elders, we talk to them with respect. The same when you guys do. If you don't know them, you use the formal tone. That's what we used to.
Mm.
So those
Mhm.
were even though our language is different and mannerism may be different, that was the same. But I started to
Mm.
notice that once he started to get comfortable, then he was very friendly. And that's what Koreans are, right? Like the
That's
moment
very Korean way.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
So the most of the Korean very reserved as you describe it. So we need some time to open our mind. So once the barrier is just descriptive and just we friendly react and just share everything like a friend and very close family. So
yeah.
yeah, we still have a time.
Yeah, yeah, and
That's the
that
Korean way.
and then that's what I started to learn that even for me, because
Mm.
like with Mexicans, like we're friendly to everybody,
Mhm.
even if we're speaking formally, which
Mhm.
is with usted, which was kind of adding the yo to everything, right? Um,
Mm.
and versus tú, that's very like taking out yo out of like
Yeah.
everything, right?
Mhm.
Even though we're talking in formal tone, our mannerism is very friendly. And we
Mm.
it's like we talk to an emo almost. Like the
Mm.
formal, like yeah.
Mm.
Like when you go
Mm.
to a restaurant and you're like, emo, like can I get more
Ah,
panchan?
like the way.
Yeah, yeah, that's something like that. That's probably the best way for Koreans to understand the formality of
Mhm.
friendly formality Mexicans do. And
Mm.
so when I started interacting, especially with my in-laws, I had to tone it down. Like he was very like Grecia tone,
Right.
right? That's his biggest fears, and I would get the looks like, right?
Yeah, it sounds like, there was the biggest culture difference that you
Yeah,
first experienced with Korean
like
people.
chariot, like I was in taekwondo mode, chariot, be because yeah, it can be intimidating. Because with Mexican, like I was telling you, like you can talk formal, but it's still you can still be playful and you can still treat
Mm.
them like they're gonna be your friend. Like that's how you start
Mhm.
talking to them.
Mhm.
But with
Yeah.
Korean, it's like you need to approach like they don't know you at all, and you just
Mhm.
gotta see them like maybe 3, 4 times, and then after the third, fourth, fifth time,
Yeah.
now you're chingos.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Exactly. Maybe
right?
more than
Maybe
3 or
more,
4 times,
depending.
actually.
Introvert,
Yeah,
probably more, right? But an
right.
extrovert Korean, like maybe 3, 4 times.
Yeah, even extrovert person, they still need the time to
Mhm.
open their real personality to the
Yes.
people. So more than 3 or 4 times. By the way, Grisha, I'm gonna just cut your speaking because for the listeners, this exactly what I'm talking before we jump into our today's topic. The
Huh.
Grisha has a bunch of experience about Korean culture and Korean people. Even though now we just studied our first topic, but
I'm telling
she
you,
wanted to yeah,
we can
she
easily
wanted
just keep going. Do you want me to read that? How about this? Just edit it.
no, but I'm really happy. I'm
But no,
really
but
happy to
it's
discuss
it's
about it.
just yeah. I think because it's hard to just say like break it down,
Mhm,
and because with knowing your partner is
mhm.
knowing you have to know where they come from, especially
Okay.
once things start to get serious and you start talking about marriage because you're married and I don't know in Korean culture I think so because now that I
Mhm.
have my sister-in-law and she
Yeah.
married and I got to experience that.
Mhm, mhm,
If
mhm,
there's something similar with Korean and Mexican culture that families are
mhm,
getting married.
mhm. Yeah, we always put family the first, so we consider
Exactly.
family very important in
Yeah,
our
and
life.
yeah, I know it like I was answering stuff that we'll cover for later, but
It's okay. I'm gonna edit
yes,
it.
edit it. Clean cut. Yeah, I think getting to know your partner, if you're gonna be like, especially in a relationship with multiple heritage, you really
Mhm,
need to be open that they're different from you. And I think
mhm,
that is something that it took me time, and took
mhm,
him time, right? Because when it's us two, I mean, we were great, right? But then the moment we started to talk that okay, we want to get married, so then I wanted
mm,
to see. I think it's a little. Oh, here's what's different with Koreans. We in US too, not just Mexicans and or Hispanics,
mhm,
but it is normal for us to bring our boyfriends to the family gatherings. So even
mm.
where in Koreans, you guys get to meet the parents when you're serious about getting
Definitely.
married, right? So it's right before
Wait,
marriage,
I wanted to
right?
yeah, I wanted to check the fact. The right
Yeah.
after marriage, this is the common case when we made a decision to get married, and
Mm.
then we just show partners to our parents.
Yeah, and there's
But
yeah.
yeah, but your culture just bring your boyfriend or girlfriend to the
Mhm.
parents before you made a decision to get married. Is it very common?
Yeah, it's very
Whoa.
common even from young
Yeah, Korean
age.
is very serious. Young age
Yeah.
as well. Okay.
Yeah, no, Korean culture, that's where I learned it's not like they didn't know we were dating, obviously. Like they
Mm.
knew we were dating, but I never really had any one-on-one conversations with my in-laws
Mhm.
before then,
Mhm.
right? I just knew I would ask, but on the other hand, like, it's normal for like if even around high school, if a girl has a
Mhm.
boyfriend,
Mhm.
sometimes are welcome to family parties or family barbecues
Mm.
or things like that. Like
Really?
I have cousins. My dating life in high school wasn't that great, so I didn't really have but like I have some I know, right? Shame. But I have some cousins that, they're in high school, like older high school age, and they bring their boyfriends along. And
Mm.
that's very common, like young 20s.
Wow.
You bring boyfriend and
Very different
yeah, very
comparison to
different.
Korean culture.
Yeah, and then for me, it's sometimes that I live away, like I go in and who's that?
Okay.
No, so
Yeah.
it's very normal because I think for us is important, at least for me.
Mhm.
It was very important that was my significant other going to respond to my family. And
Mhm.
then Jay, my husband, he did wonderful. Like even I was like, wow. And all my family like loved him because
Mhm.
he didn't get shy, like even though he's serious, like he was like, "Okay, let's go." Kinda like when in Rome, do what
Mm,
Romans do. That's was how he went in. So he met my family, like, when we were just dating,
mm,
you know?
okay.
Yeah, so I invited him to come over to, like, a big family gathering, and that was the first time they met him, and I think he we went a couple of times, he met my mom, my brother,
Mm,
and even my dad and my step siblings. Like he's met everybody even before
mm,
like we were talking about marriage. But that because for us is very normal. We want to see there's
mhm,
chemistry, not just with
mhm,
me, but also
mhm,
with my family.
mhm.
So when it came to the conversation, like, yes, let's get married, that's when he started his own, I don't want to say battle, but like his own drama, right? Because he had
On
to tell
drama,
his
yeah.
parents and, obviously, yeah, that's no, it wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. But go ahead.
I think your husband, Jay, already made a decision to get married with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he made a plan, like the strategy
See,
to
yes,
hang out
exactly.
oh,
And
hang
that's
out
what I
with your
didn't know.
family.
And that I
Because
didn't know
from
that.
Korean's perspective, we always make it perfect before we get getting married. So, when I just think about my girlfriend, but our relationship is not that, the marriage stage, I'm always careful not to expose my girlfriend to my parents before we got really seriously the married,
Mhm.
thinking over something like that. So I think your husband already made the decision inside his mind. So
I didn't know.
that's the
I know. Just having fun. I was like, "I like him. I think you can
okay.
still like him too." Like, yeah, for me, like, and not everybody, obviously, there are some people
Mhm,
that are more formal and they only bring like, I told my brother, only bring
mhm,
me serious girlfriends. I don't want like I'm just getting to know her and see how it is. No, I was like, no, bring me like the ones you want me to meet. So it depends from person to person. But yeah, like how you said, like I didn't realize
mhm.
that cultural difference
Okay.
of it until when he told
Yeah.
me I have to talk to my parents. And
Mm.
I was like, I'd send my mom a text and then my mom sent me the emoji. That's the cultural difference, right? And with him, like you said, like, I didn't realize, like, there was so much in thought and so much he had to
Mm,
do on his end
mm,
because he had obviously, because he was in US and the parents in Seoul, he
Korea.
had a call and kinda saying that, and as you may know, obviously, it's very common for students in universities stage to go abroad, right?
Mhm.
So the plan for him was to go study abroad and come back, right? And I mean,
Yeah, that's the very common.
yeah, that's very common. Well, actually, for him, he came from high school and university. So he was here for a long time. So for him was that doing the call that like, not only am I getting married, but I'm not going back. Like I'm gonna stay. So that's
Wow.
why there was more level of
Yeah, she made you,
complicity.
very comfortable, right? That yeah,
Yeah.
the relieved about his calling. So yeah, it
Yeah.
was really good one.
So they parents came to visit. Like,
To
they
meet you
like,
for the
almost
next
kinda
step.
like
Okay.
yeah, no, they came to they're kinda like, "No, we're gonna talk in person." And they came to
Mm,
visit, and, I got to meet them for the first time. I was like, "Did I tell you?" Right? And and I mean, I think luckily we got along very well. The first time we because we lived in Florida, we went to the theme parks, went to Universal and
mm,
in Disney because I used to work in Disney. So I was tour guy. I was like, let's go here, here, here. So I was like host. That was the host. Like this and like that. And obviously because I just can't help being like lively and positive. I don't know. I guess
mm,
they enjoyed it, and after that, they were gonna go to a family cruise, just them.
mm,
So this is why I'm saying it because it was, like, kinda like a moment of, "I'm just going with you guys to the theme parks, and then you guys go to your cruise for your family trip, and,
mm.
we'll see you later," right? And surprisingly, like, my omoni was kinda like, "Oh, it's so sad that you can't come with us." And I'm like, "Oh, well, I guess no, you guys have, oh, thank you so much, but enjoy your family time. And that's when they had that serious conversation of like, that
Mhm.
mother-in-law was kind of like, I was coming with a mentality that I was going to tell you to no, and you should come back.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
seeing, like we did a whole tour, he got to meet some of our closest friends. We took them to eat.
Mm.
They went to school, so they were able to see for the first time, like, where he was living, and I guess that he was happy. And so
Mm.
where my mother-in-law was kinda, like, accepted it and said that this
Mm.
is good, and
Okay.
yeah, and then that was the other talk to the grandparents, right? Because then that's another conversation I didn't know what. Yeah, so that's when I started to learn more of, like, the hierarchies and
Mm.
how, language is very important in Korea.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
hierarchy is everything
yes,
here in
and
Korea.
and
So,
I didn't know. Like for you, are you like you're the eldest son or the only son?
I'm a eldest son.
The eldest, right?
I have some responsibility to
Exactly.
take
So that's what
take
my
care of
Jay
my
had.
parents and my grandparents.
Yeah, so that's was with Jay, and that's something
Mhm.
also, like, I didn't know, like, because with obviously and with Hispanics, we just as long as you're happy, we're happy for you. That was the sentiment.
Mm.
Please protect her
Mm.
and, take care of each other, love each other. That's the sentiment my
Mhm.
family, like, was like, "Good luck, Grecia," like, you know, and then we had a party, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's another thing we can talk about, that's
Mhm. Mhm.
that's where I started to realize more in depth of the marriage culture because it's like first
Yeah.
the parents, and then with him, with Jay, he's like the son of the son of the son of the son, like of
Yep.
the first Sims. So
First to see him.
the first
Okay.
Sims. So like, yeah, so his grandpa was like was the first of his generation, right? And then his dad was the only son, and then Jay is the only son. So that's why even having a conversation to the grandparents was important to break it to them
Mhm.
that like Jay's getting married to a non-Korean.
Yeah, you have to get some permission from grandparents.
Yeah, and yeah, and then so they were worried. They were worried because obviously our grandpa Sim, that's what I call him. Harbaji Sim, he was very, very formal. Like, I mean, this man, he fought in the Korean Wars. Like, he was a veteran, very esteemed, like in his city of Donghae, like very like important figure of the city and helped revive the city. So that's why it was very important for them, like the preservation
Uh-huh.
of that. And obviously, this I learned after my first trip
Mhm.
Korea. So all of this conversation happened even before I went to Korea. So by the yeah, but luckily, like I guess they accepted it. They were happy with, yeah, as long as he's happy at the end. And then we got married. And then a year
Mhm.
after, that's finally when I went to go to Korea.
Mhm.
And that was another experience because of the addition to the marriage part, because that's when I had to do all my formal greetings. Like, we didn't have a Korean
Mm.
wedding, but we did like dinners with
Uh,
both sides
Dinners
of,
with the whole family,
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So we did family dinner with my Omoni side and then my Aboni side. Um,
아버님 side.
Yeah, so we did both, which also is very different from Hispanics because for us, like a normal wedding, like we invite
Mhm.
everybody, right? Everybody, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
It could a small Mexican wedding is 300 people. Like
Oh,
that's
300 people. Okay.
yes, and weddings over here are like we party, like dance,
Mm.
cake,
The Korean's
drinks.
wedding is so different actually. We are very formality one. Just
Mhm.
only within 30 minutes, we have to do every ceremonies.
Yes! I always wanted to go because I always saw them in the dramas. But, like,
Mm.
example in Mexican weddings, like or in US too. I think US is closer to
Mhm.
US wedding, but Mexican wedding, like, we'll have the church ceremony first, and then depending on the style or place you are, you'll have a dinner. and then at the ballroom, like they rent like similar to you
Mm.
guys, like a big ballroom,
Yeah.
but instead of like a nice long hallways, we take make that a dance floor. And
Mm.
then so everybody's has their tables, everybody's eating, everybody's enjoying, drinks in there, and then we dance for like 4 hours. And, it's from
4
9 AM.
hours for a dance?
Yeah, it's like it starts at 9 AM and they end like at 2 AM.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and then in
It
the
took more
middle
than a day.
yeah, and then we do like it starts with the bride and the groom, do the first dance,
Mm.
and then the bride dances with the dad, the groom dances with the mom, his mom,
Mhm.
and then
Yeah.
we all dance and drink.
Yeah.
And then we in the
It sounds
middle
so fun.
cut the cake
Mhm.
and then dance the
Mhm.
last thing. And then at the end, we go to somebody's house because they have like chukejang to eat. No, just kidding, chukejang. It's Korean, I mean Mexican food, but like that's the closest example. It's food
Yeah,
for
like the
hangover.
해장국. Yeah, food
Yeah,
for hangover. We call it 해장국 in Korea.
jjangkook. There you go.
Yeah. Grisha, this is the different topic, but wow, it's a very interesting
It's all
story
part of
because
marriage. It's part of the
yeah,
marriage. It's the
yeah,
beginning of the marriage.
exactly.
That's
Right.
very different.
Comparison to the two different countries, the marriage style is a totally
Yeah.
different because as I said, the Korean wedding is like the meeting. We
Yeah.
just the close every ceremony is within
Mhm.
certain time, like at least 1 hour. Yeah, we have to go. So sometimes when I go to the wedding ceremony, I just skip the ceremony and I just
Just go
start
there.
eating something. Yeah, and then just to see their ceremony in a
And the
screen.
two that yeah, I got to experience my first Korean weddings
Mm,
when my
mhm,
sister-in-law married 2 years ago, and then we had a cousin that married,
mm.
last year. And yeah, like I was excited. I was like, oh my God, because I haven't seen my family, whole family since my wedding dinner. Because like for Mexicans, we see each other a lot. Like someone's birthday
Mm.
present, like maybe now that you have kids, right? And if you do a birthday party, I don't know about you, but I heard it's very normal to just be your parents or just be your
Just be my
just
parents.
just your
My
parents.
parents in law's side,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah. Like it's very like it becomes just your husband's land. That's
Yeah,
right.
right.
And even with Korean language, right? You harmony and haraboji is specifically for your grandparents from your dad's parents, right? Where
Yeah.
in Mexico is everybody. Like we invite like if J parents live here and
Mm,
mine too, like I have everybody. So when
mm,
actually, when later on, fast forward with my children, I had my mom and my omoni and my awoni
mhm.
in my house, and we're like, oh, we're no, they when they're coming here, we're all together, and then for them, it was very like
Wow.
culture shock, right? Because they're like,
Yeah.
why are we gonna spend
Is it
with your in-law, right?
right? It's a very uncommon in Korea, actually, as you explained it. Actually, once we got married, I think my parents and my wife's parents' side, we never meet again.
Yeah,
After very big ceremony and event, we never meet and hang out with each other in case we just to make the something impersonally. So
yeah,
it is
yeah.
a very uncommon situation.
Yeah, and then for me, it's like the opposite. Like we
Mm,
like, I grew up knowing my aunt's in-laws. Like,
mm.
let me put it that way. Like, people and, like, where my husband that's why for my husband, like, "You have too much family." Because my omoni, when I explained to her, like, the dynamics of the Mexican family, she said that
Mhm.
it's similar to how it was for her generation. So, like, for your mom's
Mm.
generation, that, like, your mom was hanging out a lot with your cousins with her cousins,
Mhm.
with her cousins,
Exactly.
and then
Mhm.
she knew her great aunt and the great uncle, and then the
Mhm.
imo of here, the imo of that. Like, that's how Mexican culture is. And
Mm.
that's
Mhm.
the one thing I wish it was, I kinda wish it was similar, right? But with the marriage part, that's where I started to learn that, like, the when I finally went to Korea, obviously, the first people I greeted were the grandparents, right?
Mhm.
And first we met the same grandparents, same, right? My
Mm.
abueling. side. We did the bow. I had to learn to bow.
The Korean way bow.
Right. So we learned to bow and do that. And then after that, we went to have a dinner
Mm,
with that side of the family. And even within the dinner, like, you know, because of the way the place was, like, it was like the adult table and the kids table. So all the grandparents, they were all sitting there. And then even though, like, Jay and I were the bride and groom, and I was wearing a hot
mm.
in the middle of the summer, it was so hot. I was, I sit down,
Wow.
I was sitting, and, the cousins started to arrive, and we were all sitting on the cousin table.
Mm, mm,
I remember the reaction of one of the cousins, like, he was like, "Oh, yeah, let's sit down." Like, because he realized he was sitting next to me. And, like, going back to the theme, just because he doesn't know me, I'm the only person in the table he didn't know, and, now he's sitting next to me. And I was like, "Come on, I don't bite. Sit down." But, yeah, and I just saw them briefly, like, I greeted them, and
mhm,
then we
mhm,
finished the dinner, and then, "Okay, bye, nice to
mhm.
meet you." And I didn't see them again until 10 years later on my
10 years later. Yeah, that's a very common.
sister-in-law's wedding. So I was like, "No, we're gonna
Mhm,
go because I wanna see them." I haven't seen them in so long. Like, there was a kid that's 5, like, he was, like, maybe 5 years old, and then
mhm.
I saw him again. Now I had my kid 5 years old, and he was teenager now.
Mm.
Um, that's very different on the marriage part too. Very different.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I have a couple of things I wanted to talk about the marriage life.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know which point I gonna start with you, but you
Yeah.
spilled a bunch of things, so we're gonna touch one by one, okay?
Yeah. We can focus
So
this one
going,
if it helps.
yeah, this
We
is
we
gonna be
we can
our
just
the
do
main
marriage.
topic for this
We
podcast.
can
Yeah,
let's
today
just
we're
do
gonna
marriage
talk about we're gonna
because
focus on the marriage,
let's
okay?
do the marriage because seriously, I have so much I can say. I can give you 5
Yeah.
episodes. And then we can talk about music because we
Great,
need to talk
great.
about music. It's my
Okay.
favorite. Okay. So let's do
Yeah,
marriage.
and also okay, so today we're gonna focus on the marriage thing. So Gracia, I wanted to point out one thing about your experience. You said your husband is the Sims family, maybe the Sims
Yes.
parents, the son of son of son of son.
Uh-huh.
We call it like the in Korean way, the 3대 독자. I don't know exactly your husband is the same things of generation, but it means like the son of a son. Maybe the only
Yeah.
son of the family. We call
Uh-huh.
them like the 3대 독자. And what I wanted to say to you, in Korea, in the marriage market, your husband case is the most worst case. Every woman doesn't want
Avoid
to get
sound.
married with like the
Oh,
3대 독자
I
because,
didn't know either
you
until
didn't know
I
that.
got there. I didn't know either. I found out
Yeah,
after I my
the
first talk.
Yeah, the reason why, as you said, the 3대 독자 in Korea takes the bunch of responsibility to
Mm,
take care of their family, like their own family, the parents and the
yeah.
grandparents and grandparents. So they have some of the duty and responsibility. So most of a woman really hate to get married with that kind of son of family.
A son of son.
So
Yeah.
son of son. So your husband made a really good decision to get married with you.
I like to say that
Going over
too.
your head.
He has a great deal. I'm very optimistic about it too. Like, no, and yeah, like, because of the marriage for it, like, I think and this is something also I learned from talking to other friends,
Mhm.
where as K drama grows internationally,
Okay.
I will say it. Like, I think there's misconception sometimes that, like, all Korean men are like
Mm.
발군모, like, like they're like, oh my god, like they're the drama hero guy. Like, for my lack of Korean words, like in Japanese, like the tsundere, right? Like they think
Mhm.
they all Korean men are like that, and I'm like, no,
Wait, tsundere is Japanese?
tsundere, yeah,
Actually, I didn't know that.
yeah,
Tsundere, yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
the ones that are,
Alright.
like, I will
Mhm.
say my little J is a little bit like that, but no, but, like, there's this misconception that, like, the Korean men are like the dramas, right? And And I mean, not saying that there's no charming men out there. I know that all men have their charm, but like, unfortunately, because they have this bias, right? They're like, I want a Korean guy. And then luckily, it wasn't that case for me because I didn't even watch the
Mhm.
dramas. Like, my first drama was with Gun Pyo, and that wasn't, it wasn't my favorite. Wasn't the person I idolized, but
Okay.
very different from now, right? The Korean
Mm.
drama perspective. So
Yeah.
I think like sometimes they forget that there's still a culture behind it, the man, right? The
Mm.
men are
Mm.
very
Mm.
different in actual
Mhm.
Korean society. So
Mhm.
like when
Mhm.
you start dating someone, because I had a friend like that, she's like, I don't know, why is he like this? Why is he like that? And then I was already married to my husband. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
unfortunately or fortunately for you, that's how a real Korean man is. And it goes back to what you were saying, where,
Mm.
it depends also if they're the youngest, the oldest, or the middle, right? And then for my case,
Mhm.
I was the oldest.
Mhm.
And then even till now, like he has a very strong sense of responsibility as the oldest,
Mm. Okay.
regardless of being the sim and later when I met the grandparents, I got that feeling of that that's how he was raised. Like he was raised
Mhm. Mhm.
and they were always telling him that you are the 24th? 24 Samchok Sim from Chanso. Cham Sam
참석?
yeah, it's the clan, Samchok Sim, that he's the
삼척심.
20 yeah, we're from Donghae.
권위스
So we're
와
Dong
삼척.
Samchok.
삼척도 강
See, I
in
learned it
Gangwon
too.
province.
They made
Okay, yeah.
Harmony made me learn it. Like she's like he
Mm,
always that and he would tell me like and I could sense that pride of his.
I
Like
see.
my
Okay.
grandma when I left, she always told me that never forget that I'm the
Mhm.
23rd of the Samchok Sim clan.
Wow.
Yeah.
23rd of 삼척.
Yes. And we went to the pavilion. I'll send you photos I can show later.
Okay. Alright. I'm gonna just put the photo into our YouTube video. Yeah, maybe there.
Yeah, because when you go to Donghae, there's a small pavilion, and it's
Mm,
in remembrance of the Samchok Sim. It's I have a photo and there the first time we went, because like talking to the grandparents, it made me feel that I was carrying a big responsibility. And
mm,
I grew up with my grandparents, so that's why I was very respectful to them. And
mm,
I naturally I just embraced them as my own grandparents, right? And
mm, mm,
I felt like that sense that even though I was a foreigner to them,
mhm,
they
mhm,
were doing their best to include me in their knowledge and what they wanted to pass on to our next
mm.
because now I was
Uh-huh.
responsible of bringing that done, right? That 25th. Yeah,
Okay.
and no pressure, right? But I think that was very valuable time to me. Like they already passed, but
Mhm,
even though we had a lack of communication, like the first time we met them, it was very memorable because it was
mhm, mhm,
they arrive and there's the Haraboji had this aura
mhm.
like the Godfather. Like
Oh, okay.
that the song was in my
Okay.
mind from your Running Man, which one? Um, like you would just like you straighten out your back and make sure you're good. And he was quiet but always looking, like observing,
Mm,
right? So I
mm,
was base behavior, right? And
mhm,
my omoni had a very old school omoni. Like my harmony
mhm,
was very, very in deep Korean culture, like old style, right? Like the culture of the
mhm,
mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. It was very strong. So
mhm.
they were probably the most worried of that encounter of me with her. Right? Like, with the
Yep.
harmony. So, obviously, I was like, "Ah, 안녕하세요." And then she just gave me the biggest hug. Like, "Oh, 안녕하세요." And then I'm like, "안녕하세요." And then I just looked because my mother-in-law was behind the harmony, and I just see my mother-in-law and then Jade.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
my omani was like, she never hugged me before.
Maybe jealous of you.
I don't know. And then we were grilling meat, grill from meat from Donghae. Oh, so good,
Mhm.
so good. You please, if you ever go, have some. And we were eating, and was obviously they're all talking in Korean. I don't understand anything, but it was even before I took classes with you, so I had no
Yeah.
knowledge,
Okay.
nothing. Right? It was worse than.
Mhm.
And they're all talking, and I'm just like, I'm just eating. And then all of a sudden, like my harmony, she goes, "Oh, it doesn't feel like we're eating with a stranger." Obviously, maybe for like I can see where an American side that might feel like, oh, that was a little rude or a little like, oh,
Mm.
well, she don't like me, but like I did understood that I was a compliment. that
Yep.
you know that
It is really big compliment actually.
that
To
she
someone who
didn't.
is eating very well. Yeah, it
Yeah.
is the compliment.
And
Yes.
yeah, I thank you for my grandma always pushing me to eat good. Um,
Mhm.
so that's where also those culture differences within that the marriage
Mhm.
came. And then after that, we were able to go. We went one more time a year later with my daughter. So we finally
Mm.
went and took the 25th some trucks in, right?
Okay.
And they were so in love with her, and one of those like no, not last, but conversations we had with good conversations I had with her. I during that time I obviously learned how much they did for Korea and the
Mm.
independence and everything, and all the struggles they went through. Like all they to my
Mm.
father, like that's the great. Harabachi Sim is real life story of all they to my father, and I felt like very strong about it because that was also my first time going to Donghae and going to the
Mm.
pavilion and seeing their
Mhm.
pictures, like all those memories and stuff. I have photos.
Yeah.
I took photos of the photos, and I told her like I know that I may be different, but I want to reassure you that I'm going to make
Mhm.
sure that my children learn
Mhm.
about you and Harapuji and what you guys have been through and everything
Mhm.
that, you have done for my husband.
Mhm.
Obviously,
Mhm.
and I'll make sure that no matter what, they will know about you. That
Mhm.
and show them that have them make sure they have pride in being Korean and being some Samchuksin. And then she just
Mhm.
looked at me, she's like, "But yeah, tell them about me too, okay?" I'm like, "Yes, yes." That was her response. Not just the but me too. Like, "Yes, yes, of course, of course."
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
It's a
that
really the touching story.
yeah, yeah, I
Wow.
know.
So when we gonna to the Samcheok in Gangwon province, we can see that some of the statue or some statue of stones writing in like the Samcheok Sims family,
Yeah.
things like that. Because yeah, as far as I heard that some very rural province, there are
Mhm.
some the family names, the representative, the statues or something.
Yeah.
Maybe the Shim is one of the representative, the family name in the
Yeah.
Samcheok area.
Yeah.
Yeah, very
Yeah, no,
interesting
and
story.
obviously because they're the first of the first when Harabaji was alive, like that's when I learned how
Mm,
you guys like when
mm,
like
mhm,
if
mhm.
there's someone from your top clan, you go visit them. So I learned a lot from that, from that experience with that people would come visit.
From my point of view, these days, the young people, I don't want to blame the young people these days, but the young people who got married with this kind of traditional
Mhm.
family, they never go there and just embrace the difference. I
Yeah,
think they just, yeah, stay away from the cultural things because they don't want to get in a trouble with
elder.
the family duty and yeah, elder things.
It's a
I
lot of
think
hard
you are
work.
different.
I
Yeah, it's a real hard
understand.
work.
I yeah.
Yeah, your story, it sounds like that you embrace the culture difference and the full of the respect of the elder
Yeah,
people. So that's the you just the
yeah,
made the relationship really very close and friendly. So it is really
yeah.
touching story, but.
Thank you, thank you. I think if that's one thing that our cultures had in common, that we
Mhm.
always we take our elders all the way.
Mm.
If you haven't seen Coco, please go see Coco, and you'll understand a little bit more of that. Like, have you seen
The Coco
Coco?
the movie,
Yes,
Mexico
a
movie.
Mexican movie.
I watched a side of the story, but I didn't
You
watch
should
that
watch it.
movie fully.
And then I
Yeah,
don't know,
okay.
you might cry. I cry. I cannot watch that movie now. Like I think it first it reminded me of my great grandma because
Mhm.
she looked just like Mama Coco. That's my great grandma. It looks the same. And then later when my grandpa passed, then I started to think of like the grandpa.
Mm, okay.
But you'll
Yeah.
see
So
with yeah, movie, you're probably gonna see the similarities that we are, a generational families that come together and whether
mhm,
obviously for us doesn't matter if it's the mom side or the dad side, it's all the sides. But you'll understand that there's very similar values
mhm. Okay.
that come
So
come in close.
I have to watch that movie to understand more about Mexican culture as you
Yeah,
explained it. And also I'm gonna find out what is the similarity between these two countries and what you point out about your full story of your marriage life. So I'm
you're
gonna
gonna
watch it.
see.
And also for the listeners, please watch the Coco
Go watch
movie
Coco.
to understand more, yeah, about the Mexican culture.
Yeah, you can have you yeah, it'll be funny. We can do a whole episode of that because there's gonna be things that I don't want to call out now that we can easily say. My harmony told me that too. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of visual references.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grisha, so in your story, I realized that a couple of funny things. The first is about the Korean man's these days stereotype. What the most woman in your side think about. I mean, you said your one of your friends is dating with a Korean man, and now she is realizing what Korean man is really
Oh, she already married
blah
him.
blah blah. Oh, she only married him.
They have
Okay.
married and have a kid, but while they were dating, I told her I
You
was like,
see.
"You just need to."
Okay.
I the first thing I advise, take away the mentality that
Mm,
he's
yeah.
gonna be like that
So
because they're not.
right.
And now they've been
S
together a long time, and now too.
great. What I, uh, the got a little touching part from your side is that, as you said, someone who is dating with the Korean man, they have some of a stereotype of the Korean man from the maybe the K culture, the Korean drama or Korean movie. But you pointed out the people should understand the behind the culture things. So that was really the great statement that I want to highlight for the this podcast, the listeners.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I have one question for you. You are married to the Korean man. You are definitely the different the culture you are experiencing these days. Comparison to the other couple who got married with the Mexican couple, is there any difference that you feel, or you maybe
Yeah.
tear apart what is the main difference?
Yeah, I know. Well, they go party more. They probably drink
Okay, just enjoy the life
They probably
for
party
fun.
more. No, yeah, right. Yeah, no, no. Well, I will say this. Like,
Mhm,
I definitely think because of the way the Korean culture is, I think I've slowly learned to to be more responsible.
mhm,
But no, just be a little bit more. They take things a little bit more seriously because as you notice with my personality, right? I'm a little
mhm,
bit
mhm,
more like not goofy, but, more relaxed. Where there's
mhm.
things that I think with when it's you're in a Mexican environment and in a Hispanic environment, sometimes you just focus on being happy,
Mm,
whether which is good too. But sometimes you get just with what's comfortable. Like maybe you don't thrive to get ahead because you're happy
mhm,
here
mhm.
and that's okay like that
Okay.
and which is good and bad because I think with my husband like because I think influence from the Korean society that you guys like to make sure you're in the best spot,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
You always I notice that with Korean in whether it's marriage, whether it's in your job, where for your kids, right? That you're
mhm,
always looking,
mhm,
make what's the best for my kid. If it's my job
mhm,
over here, and then my kid over here, and then maybe my
Mhm.
hours are less, but it's okay because it's the best decision for my kids, right? So
Mm.
where Hispanics sometimes in the opposite side, not saying that they're not hard workers, like they will work hard, but sometimes
Yeah.
I notice because even talking to my family,
Mhm.
it's harder to get them to get out of that comfort zone. And so like
Mm.
it will work very
Mhm.
hard,
Mhm.
but like just within
Mhm.
that circle. And then like, hey, if
Mm.
you it might be uncomfortable, but if you can get better quality. Try to do a little bit more so that you have a better position and things like that. Like
Mm.
that's where I think we balance each other out.
Mm.
Where
Okay.
yeah, like from my difference with when I was dating Hispanics.
Mhm.
Even even
Mhm.
even before I dated, met my husband, I did try to like,
Mhm.
did a couple first dates with other
Mhm. Mhm.
people. And and then that's when I started to notice, like, that I was already in college and, I actually met this one boy from like a soccer club when I used to play
Mhm.
soccer. And, he was kind of like just happy working at a bartending job or like at the restaurant and everything. And, I was going to school. And then I don't know, it's also
Mhm.
because I'm a woman, a strong woman. But I was sorry. I, wa-
No, no, no.
I was always career oriented, but I didn't realize how I really wasn't career oriented until I met Jay. Because I
Mm.
knew I wanted to do more, but I just didn't know how, maybe. But then I noticed that the people within maybe sometimes of my age and within in my race were okay where they
Mhm.
were at. Like maybe they were
Mhm.
not pursuing higher education. Maybe they were okay just doing keeping it easy, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's when, when I that's the one thing I tell my husband that before you I thought I was
Mhm.
okay where I was.
Mm.
So I think that's the fun part of when you join cultures that you start
Right.
thinking about it like that.
Yeah, I fully understand that part as you explained it. I think the Korean is more goal oriented and
Mhm.
they have a really high expectation over their life.
Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like Korean is living in the future. They
Yeah.
cannot stay in the present to enjoy the happiness.
Yes. And that's the
Yeah.
opposite with
So
Mexicans.
yeah.
We are
So
happy in the present.
so you guys, I mean, I'm talking about the Mexican people.
Mhm.
They are more enjoying the present
Mhm.
to keep the right here is the happiness. But Korean, oppositely, we are just seizing the big happiness
Yeah,
rather than keeping
exactly.
the current hour happiness.
Yeah.
And also, you explained it before. The Mexican is more for fun, and Korean is more serious
You
when
guys are
we
fun
meet
too.
first.
You guys are fun
Yes,
too.
exactly.
But
It
maybe
depends on the people.
maybe after like, some soju bomb or like that,
Yeah,
you let it
yeah.
go.
The dinner party and the alcohol, so it made me, you know,
Yeah, maybe
the
after that.
people really crazy. Yeah, yeah. Maybe after that. So yeah, I think that is really interesting part comparison to the Mexican culture as you explained it.
Mhm.
So I also feel that I realized that the most of the Korean is not enjoying their life fully
Mm.
and we are always thinking about our future and also as I said we always have like the very high expectation and comparison to the other people who got very successful so always reaching out that level
Yeah.
but you know it is really competitive to get the same success all the time
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
that's the
like they
reason why the Korean people is very stressed out
yes.
about that reality.
Yeah. Yeah, like and it's funny, there's like sometimes you probably see it in the news, like there's these attacks and the narcos and all of that in Mexico, right? And that's what you see in the news. What I see in social media is all the memes.
Mm,
Like memes about the situation, like because it's something that
mm,
like I think because where with Koreans, like you guys are stressed, right? And so for you guys, you're like, I'm
mhm,
gonna work hard. So I'm not I'm still stressed, but I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna work hard. That's how you guys got out of your state from the Korean Wars to like the 80s. You guys were booming. But like in Mexico, like it's like, we laugh it out. We laugh so
Mm.
we don't
Let's
cry
get
about it.
out.
Yeah.
Mm,
So where, even when you might see in the news that the situations is very bad, like you're gonna go to social media and then someone's already making a joke about it, like something funny about it. Like someone made like something happens and there's like 20 memes already. Like that's
mm,
I always think that Mexico does not conquer the world because they don't want to. Like,
mhm,
because when we get in the mindset of it, like we do it,
mhm,
like just as good as the Koreans, but it's getting out of that, like that
mm,
comfort. It's that comfort zone. But I think that's something that we can learn from each other. That like where I think you guys make your dreams into goals,
mhm,
and then your goals, like it's you do a project list and a notebook planner and you're
mhm,
like
mhm,
scratching it off,
mhm,
right? For Mexicans, we sometimes just dream and
mhm,
we tell it to each other, like we should dream so that we can believe and
mhm.
make it. Like we do tell each other, but we keep telling each other, like never stop
Okay.
dreaming, never stop dreaming. Yeah, like yeah, but you got to do it.
Mm, mm.
Even looking for life models, I was like, oh, that doesn't sound realistic. And because it's very normal, like for comparing that way. um and
Yeah, so we have to learn each other from
yeah,
our perspectives. Yeah,
get the
that is
best from each
really
other. That's what I
get the
I
best
think.
from each other. Exactly. Wow. For the listeners, now we are talking about the marriage life.
Uh-huh.
Who has the multicultural thing? So but don't get us wrong. What
I,
we are talking about now?
I know, no,
Which
but
I
it's
might,
part of it, it's part of it, it's a part of it. I don't know
yeah,
it.
I'm gonna reorganize
Yeah,
our
I will believe you,
discussion. So
and then I'm gonna
yeah.
comment missing 20 minutes of footage.
Right. By the
Any
way,
more
I
questions
almost
of
forget
marriage?
to.
Any more questions
I
of
have
marriage?
a but that for this episode, as we said, we're gonna focus on the marriage first,
Yeah,
and the other episode we're gonna talk about our the childish the education things because I'm very curious about how you
yeah,
couples growing your kids with the culture and language way,
yeah.
and also your
Another
working
episode.
experience with Korean. Oh
That's
my
another
gosh,
episode.
another
I'm
episode,
telling
and
you,
your music.
you're never in the music.
Maybe the three
Yeah.
or four more episodes we're gonna record together. By the way, before I forgot to talk about that one, when you talked about your first meeting with your husband, you talked about your first Korean things, the Taekwondo, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to talk more about that one
Yeah.
because when I watched a couple of the Mexican movies, I realized that there was some of the taekwondo scenes in there. Yeah, recently, not a recently, yeah, 2 or 3 years ago,
Mhm.
I watched the movie Rom, one of the best movie in the world, I think. Yeah, the Rom. Yeah, and I saw one of the main character. He got taught the taekwondo and he did some like the how can I explain it? Like the reoat about the Mexican
Okay.
society. I
Yeah.
don't know how to yeah, I don't
I
know
think
the
I can explain maybe.
historical things.
Yeah. Okay. So
So
let's make a clean
yeah,
cut for that. All right, ready? 1, 2.
okay. So he learned about the martial arts, the taekwondo, and just do some of like the social action. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's what I saw through the many medias from
Mhm.
Mexico, and Taekwondo looks like very popular.
Yes, it's very popular. Uh,
Mhm,
and I think it's part of where we match in cultures. Where
mhm.
we may not be scholars like you guys, but we're good at fighting.
Good at fighting. Okay.
Like, I mean, you probably is super popular, like a cult, kind of like Taekwondo for Korea. The lucha libre
Mhm.
is probably is an icon of Mexico, right? Like the
What was
fighter,
that? Lucha
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 libre,
libre?
libre, like the we know how like the fighters that wear the
Lucha libre.
masks, like they wear like the colorful masks, and then they come out
Maybe
with
it's like the wrestling
yes, the
things.
wrestling,
Maybe the professional
Mexican
wrestling.
wrestling. It's called lucha libre.
Okay.
It's like
Lucha libre.
I translated it literally is like
Libre sounds
Free,
like the
free,
liberty, right?
free.
Free.
Liberte. Libre. Like free, like free fight. Free fighting.
Free fight.
Free fighting. Like
Ah,
free fighting.
okay.
That's why it's wrestling.
Ruchar means like the fighting.
Lucha is fighting, and then libre is like free. So it's like free
I
fighting.
see. Ruchar libre.
So it's always been a cultural thing. Like actually, my great uncles, like they were wrestlers in Juarez. They're like one of them, El Zombie Palacio. That was his nickname. Zombie, like zombie.
Zombie.
That was his nickname, and it's very popular. It was even to this day, the lucha libre is very popular. So I think
Mm.
I remember watching a documentary when I was very young, and then that's think after like my brother had already been doing it for a long time, Taekwondo, but maybe that's why I remember because I was older. That it was introduced in like the late 60s, like a
Mhm.
Korean. That's when I finally found out it was Korean. Like in Korean, I pulled it up. His name is Moon Tae-won, and he
They
introduced
won.
Korea
Mhm.
introduced Taekwondo in Mexico City, and he went and he opened his
Okay.
school there, and from there, it just spread it out because it was a sport that, like, Mexicans picked it up so fast, like, it grew,
Oh.
like, a lot, and it became a sport that not just, like it's not just, like, an elite sport. I think and that was good with Mexicans because it was an accessible sport. Even even if you don't have the
Mm.
gear, like, and you're in like, yeah, like all of the defensive gear, you can still practice it. So
Mhm,
whether it
mhm,
could be like a social program or you actually go to like a little taekwondo studio, it became
mhm.
very easy for kids to learn. And then from there, obviously, it spread out to MMA, but like taekwondo is still up to now, like a big sport in Mexico. Like
Very popular.
they
Oh,
do tournaments, like big tournaments and things like
uh,
that. And the same like in
mm.
Korea, like there's Tega competition and
Mhm.
sparring.
Okay.
So
Good to know that. Actually, I didn't know. Okay.
yeah,
Shout out to Moon Dae-won.
yeah,
He he made the taekwondo very popular in Mexico,
yeah. No,
and
it's
still the
it's
Mexico
big.
is loving the taekwondo thing. Okay. Wow.
Yeah, no,
Good to
you
know
should
that.
look it up because like we have one, like, I think her name Maria Espinosa, I think so, from the
Maria Espinosa?
women's team. She's won like three Olympic medals.
Oh, really? Gold
And they
medal?
were yeah, like, that's why I like
Okay.
yeah, that's one sport I like to follow in the Olympics because
Mhm.
like, the Mexico does when they go, they do go pretty far
Okay.
up to winning.
Alright. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's
Good to know
it's
that.
good. It's
Mhm.
it
Good
it
to know
and
that, Gracia.
discipline goes well. Taekwondo has a sense that discipline that matches, like, Mexico's personality,
Mm,
things like that. So it fit it
okay. Okay. Yeah. So, Gracia, let's go back on the track. I mean,
yeah.
the marriage life. This is question for you.
Ooh, that bonus clip, the story reel,
Yeah,
the story reel.
definitely. The taekwondo. Yeah. So I'm gonna reorganize this,
Yeah.
question and answer. So no worries at all.
Ask
I'm
me
gonna make
everything
the separate
everything you
clip. Yes.
want for the editing.
Okay. Yeah. Grisha, by the way, so what is the main Korean things that you've observed they're living with your husband? Just at some point, maybe you feel that this behavior, this action, this personality is typically for Korean things. Maybe you've observed
Okay, I
living
have
with
one.
your
I have
husband, maybe?
one.
Okay.
I have
What is
one.
it? Spill the tea.
Okay, so on the door, you know
Hmm.
how you guys don't take off your shoes? That's okay.
How about Mexican people?
We walk in with our shoes.
Now you are
No, we walk in with
okay,
the
now
shoes.
you're
And
used
now
to
I'm
it?
Korean. Now I'm Korean. I take off my shoes.
Okay, okay,
But
okay.
so no matter like when we started dating to even now,
Mhm,
like we even though now we have a nice shelf that we have all the shoes and we tell our kids put your
mhm,
shoes. My
mhm.
yobo leaves his shoes right in the middle of the doorway. So you know how in
Why?
the okay, you see, you don't understand. That's why. That's why it's a Korean Mexican problem. So you know how like
Okay.
it's. I understand. Not saying I'm not flexible. Don't come at me.
Mhm,
But you know how in the Koreans, the condos, right? Because almost everybody has a condo versus a home, like a house,
Mhm.
right? You
Mhm.
open the door and then you have the little room where everybody takes off their
Little
shoes.
March.
And then you have the door to go into the house. Or
Mhm.
maybe there's no door, but there's first a square for everybody to take off the shoes, and then you go, okay, 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 okay. All right. So I don't
Sorry, not a March, Forty. Sorry.
okay.
I'm yeah, Forty.
Okay.
I misunderstood the
Orgy?
word.
Okay. Okay. So in regular houses over here, we don't have that, right?
Mm.
Okay. So what we do, and like in at least in my house, we were like because we are trying to follow that custom where like you all of the shoes are in the garage in our garage
Mm.
because that became our point. Like okay, from here, but we go out, right? So we have like kind of with you guys you guys have the closet with all the rest of
Yeah,
the shoes,
we have
but you
like the shoe
always have
houses.
but
Yes.
you always have a shoe that you wear all the time. And
Always.
those are the ones that are right there for you to go in and out and you put them on and you run out, right? Okay, okay, okay,
Yes.
okay. So maybe jumps into the child care thing, but no, it's marriage thing. Where we're like, okay, let's make a space that we can put all of our shoes there. So, okay, everybody, when you take off your shoes, we're going to put the shoes in there, right?
Mhm.
Well, we all said yes. The kids say yes. But my
Mhm.
yobo leaves them right there at the door and he has the biggest foot, right?
Yep.
So when we open the door, is his sandals, like your slip on,
Sandal.
the
Yeah,
slip on,
slip
the
on.
Korean
Mhm.
slip ons, and then
Yeah.
his tennis shoes are on there in the door. So like the kids
Mm.
and then me, we have to go over the shoes to go to the area where we put on our shoes. So that's the part I'm always like, yours is
Wait,
here.
Grisha,
Yeah.
actually, it sounds like not a Korean thing. It's just only
Is
for
this
your
me?
husband's things, actually.
I thought so. I thought it's too maybe because it was like I wasn't sure because the apartments are small, so I understood like, well, this
Yeah.
is the only space we have, so you naturally just take them off and go in, right? But then
Mm.
with them, it's like all the time. So like for me, I go open the door, I kick the shoes out of the way, and then so I try to be open minded, like this is a Korean way, this Korean culture thing. So I just kick. So I do Mexican soccer, and I kick the shoes out of the way. But that's one thing I'm
I
always like,
think,
the shoes.
yeah, it's about like the men's issue, I
Yeah,
think,
yeah. I think
rather
yeah,
than the Korean thing. But yeah,
it's
the
a
most
mix of
of
both.
men did like that. Yes, so I understand.
Yeah,
Okay, Grisha. Actually, we have to talk about more things. We still have some of topics that I need to talk with you. The
okay.
other one is the raising our kids, how you guys are raising your kids in a multicultural culture, and also your working experience with Korean
Yeah.
people,
Okay.
and also your K-pop and the K things. So yeah, let's make the separate the podcast episodes.
Yeah.
All right. By the way, thank you so much for your time, and it is really the valuable time for me as well to understand about your culture difference between
Yeah.
Mexico and Korea, and also I've learned a lot from you.
Oh, of course. Like, glad you learned. Me
Very
too.
nice.
I always learn a lot. Yeah.
All right, so thank you so much for your time. See you next time.
See
Okay,
you.
I'm gonna make the schedule.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
talk
yeah.
more.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right.
Okay,
See you.
bye.